Hello everyone, I'm Steve Wilson with the Friday Night Locker Room and Space Coast Daily TV, coming to you from the Urban Automotive Studio on the 520 Causeway, Merritt Island. Today's show is sponsored by Craig Technologies and brought to you by Sidus Space. Today, Tuesday, February 28th, is Rare Disease Day. You know, if you've got your health, your family has their health, your friends are in good shape, you can count your blessings because unfortunately not everyone is in that position. I'm honored today to be joined by my guest. You may recognize her. She's one of the leaders in the space industry. She's the founder and CEO of both Craig Technologies and Sidus Space, but she's also a mother with a child inflicted with a rare disease, the Prader-Willi syndrome. Here today to talk a little bit about that. Let's find out a little bit about Prader-Willi. Carol, Craig, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
You know, a lot of people may have just heard the name Prader-Willi syndrome for the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So, and you pronounced it exactly right. Most
okay.
of the time people are like, how do you say that?
Yeah.
It's Prader, P-R-A-D-E-R-W-I-L-L-I. It's actually a German, a German scientist discovered it. But Prader-Willi syndrome is actually it's a rare genetic disorder, and I think Danny's version, my son's version, 1 in 25,000 afflicted, and it's tied to the hypothalamus. So essentially the hypothalamus malfunctions, and the hypothalamus controls everything. It controls your height, your weight, your temperature, your anxiety, and it also controls your appetite. So the worst is that individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome never feel full. And it's a genetic disorder. It's actually, it's tied to chromosome 15, which is also sort of tied to autism spectrum. And it comes about because there's typically, there's a couple different versions. There's one that there's missing material in the father's chromosome. So you get two chromosomes, one from mom, one from dad, right? And there's missing material from the father's, and that causes the hypothalamus to malfunction. The other version is like a trisomy rescue, and the reason I'm telling you this is because that's what Danny's version is. So actually end up with 3 chromosomes, 2 from mom, 1 from dad, and you can't survive with 3 chromosomes. So basically, in Danny's case, John, my husband's chromosome, got kicked out, and he ended up with 2 of my chromosomes. And because of that, then again, it's like something's just not turned on, and so there's all these other issues that come along. It's a really super, super complex disorder, actually.
Now, was he diagnosed at birth, or was it after he was born?
That's actually a very good question. So, when I was pregnant, I actually had concerns. I felt like something wasn't right, and I kept asking people, and they're like, oh, you're just a nervous mom, and all that kind of thing. And then when he was born, he had your normal kind of like Apgars, whatever. He seemed like he was fine, and then very quickly he started losing like all of his reflexes. So he would stop moving. He was breech birth, so it was C-section, and then he stopped sucking, and there were a lot of issues oxygen-wise. So they're like, all right, we're going to take him to the NICU. They start looking at him. And they did some basic genetic testing, like your normal panel, and they're like, well, there's nothing here that we can see. And then they started seeing little things. Again, no reflexes. He's kind of not really moving. He's not crying. And he also had a little bit of a VSD, a little bit of a heart murmur thing going on. And when he was actually born, this is one thing I remember that I'm laying there, and he was kind of squeaking. He had a punctured lung. So he had all these things. They're trying to figure out something's not right. It was Naval Hospital, Portsmouth, trying to figure out what's going on. Couldn't figure it out. They ended up doing a CAT scan on him. So they did a CAT scan on him, and we actually lived about an hour away from the hospital. So we had already gone home by then. He's in the NICU. Did this CAT scan. They call us up, and they said, hey, we've got the results of the CAT scan. We need you to come in and so we can share with you. And at the time, I'm like, nah, I'm not going to drive an hour and sit there and think about what's wrong or what's going on. And so I said, you need to tell me right now. And the doctor's like, no, I need you to come in. I'm like, no, you need to tell me right now. So he basically said, well, the results of the CAT scan show that 1/3 of his brain is missing, and where there should be ridges, it's smooth. And we're kind of like, okay. So we go in, the doctors talk to us about that we have this severely brain damaged child, and that's the reason that there's all these issues, and he's not moving. And I remember thinking, I was looking him in the eyes. I'm like, he's following me. I don't know what you people are talking about, but there's nothing wrong with this. But I can see him tracking me, and there's no. So we ended up putting him in a home for disabled infants. There happened to be 1 bed left, and because he was supposedly so severely disabled, we knew he needed round-the-clock care. So he had a do not resuscitate on him. We took him to that home for disabled infants, and it's a long story to how he was diagnosed, but we took him to this home for disabled infants. Horrible, as you can imagine, first child, and checking him in there. And
how old was he?
He
At what
was
age
2 weeks old.
Oh my
2 weeks
gosh.
old. Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
It was 4 days old when he told us, when they said that he had this brain damage. So he was 2 weeks old when I checked him into the home for disabled infants. And I remember asking him, I'm like, will somebody hold him? It's like, this
Yeah.
is the most horrible thing.
Oh my
so
gosh.
so we're still trying to figure out, what happens next.
Yeah.
And we came back the next day and we're sitting with the doctor there, and we're talking about long-term care and what's going to happen. And a nurse walked in, and she puts a piece of paper in front of the doctor. And now this is a different doctor. This is the Children's Hospital of King's Daughters that's in Norfolk, Virginia, because we had transferred to that hospital, transferred when he went to that home.
Yeah.
The nurse comes in, she puts that piece of paper in front of the doctor. He looks up at us and he goes, "You need to take this do not resuscitate off this child right now." And we're like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "There's nothing wrong with his brain." And we're just like,
Really?
"What?" And it was just this moment of like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Yeah.
And so we signed the paperwork, and I remember walking out to the parking lot with John, my husband, going, "What just happened?" I also, when they said there's nothing wrong with his brain, the MRI shows, or CAT scan, MRI, sorry, shows that there's nothing wrong with his brain. Actually, I left out a piece of the story. To be honest, when we left, I had asked for an MRI. I asked the doctors, and they turned me down at first because they said it's going to show the same thing. And so I pushed back and said, "No, I want an MRI. I want it." And they finally did that. I had called back to the hospital before we took him to the home for disabled infants, and they said the MRI showed the same thing as a CAT scan. So now fast forward, here's this nurse putting this piece of paper from the MRI in front of us, and the doctor there saying there's nothing wrong with his brain. So at that point, it was kind of like, let's figure out what's going on. And we were in this home for disabled infants, and they were so good. All the doctors were like, okay, we're going to figure out what's going on. Obviously, something isn't right. I would go home at night, and I would research all the different genetic disorders. It's a wonder I had another child. I was looking at all the different genetic disorders. I'm like, holy mackerel, there's a whole bunch of these. I'd come in and I'd say, can you test for this, 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 and this? And they also would come in and say, okay, we want to test him for this. And we took him home after 6 weeks, and it was about a week later that they said he has Prader-Willi syndrome. And kind of the end of that story was we found out that, well, the doctor, when I had called back to the Navy hospital to say, hey, what are the results of the MRI? And he said it was the same as a CAT scan. Must have lied or didn't look at those. And then the reason that we actually got the paperwork sent over was because there was a nurse that I became friends with who anonymously faxed over the results of the MRI.
Really?
Had she not done that, Danny would have a do not resuscitate. He would have had a do not resuscitate on him, and who knows where it would have gone.
What went through your mind when you realized that, happy, sad, mad, when you found out that he had been misdiagnosed? I bet every emotion in the world went through your mind.
Absolutely. You know what the first one was? I was like, I didn't know how I was going to fix brain damage other than I prayed a lot, but I can fix Prader-Willi syndrome. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do my homework. And I did. I researched I called up, first of all, other families that had children with Prader-Willi syndrome. And then I had some recommendations from people say, hey, why don't you look at Down syndrome successes, look at autism successes, look at all those. And I just started, anything that wasn't going to hurt him. I was all over it. I was doing, unconventional things, like cranial sacral therapy, which I think actually worked. Chiropractic care when he was just a baby, just all kinds of stuff, nutritional supplements, and anything I could, because like I said, brain damage was going to be a tough one to fix. And if all of a sudden he was fine, then everyone would know that God just did a miracle. And I figured God wasn't going to let that happen. He doesn't want everyone to know about miracles. So that was what. And then yes, I think there was some anger, that I can't believe we just went through all this.
I think I would have been really upset, but I'd have been happy. Just everything would have kind of meshed together. It probably hard to explain exactly how you felt. Because everything was running rampant.
I mean, end of the day, it was like, oh my gosh, it's it's in some ways that's a blessing. Had you known that, okay, right from the start, he has Prader-Willi syndrome. Would I have been as aggressive? Would I have been as like, here's the worst case? I don't think so.
Maybe not.
Every experience can be a positive, and that kind of was the experience.
How's he doing today?
He's doing great. I would say he has to be at the top, of individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome, and who knows why. I mean, it's very much a spectrum disorder. But we did a lot of things. When he was 3 years old, he started reading when he was 3, which is crazy. Because another symptom or another whatever of Prader-Willi syndrome, what it said online was that he would have mild to severe mental challenges, right? And so it was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean, right? Well, again, after all that misdiagnosis, I'm like, I'm going to teach this kid to read, and I threw him in front of Sesame Street, which he still loves today. He'd be so embarrassed when he hears this. Yeah,
don't let him watch this interview.
It's calming for him when he studies. But had him reading early. So from an early age, we were just like, no, I'm not going to believe what we're being told. And today, he's actually at the University of North Florida. He went to Eastern here for 3 years out of high school, and he's getting a degree in sports management up at UNF. And he himself would say he still has some challenges. He knows that, but he's in a program called Thrive, which I can't ever remember what that stands for, but transition health something. But it's for individuals with disabilities and to help them have an independent life and experience that college experience that they otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to experience.
Yeah. So many of us associate you with the space industry, but we're seeing another side, and there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that the general public doesn't see. Is there something about, I don't know if ordeal is the right word, but something that might surprise the public as far as what Dan went through and is going through? And because, like I say, most people don't see that side of you and families like yourself. Any surprises?
Well, I mean, Dan, obviously, Prader-Willi syndrome in itself is a struggle. The biggest is the never feeling full. Yeah. So there is the chance that individuals with that disability or genetic disorder can eat themselves to death. Yeah. So I approached it differently. Whereas they said you should lock your refrigerators and lock all this stuff up and do all that. Yeah, I was like, no. What I want to do is help Danny control the thing that threatens to control him. Mm-hmm. So from the beginning, we had the little kitchen, so he could play with that. We talked about healthy food. He loves the Food Channel. He loves to cook. I mean, so those things, help him, I think, control this issue. And with Prader-Willi syndrome, typically as the individuals get older, that hunger piece isn't as bad, but their metabolism slows down. And that's the struggle we have with Danny right now. So I think he has my metabolism, right? He's got the metabolism of a 56-year-old woman, right? Poor kid. Because so that makes it harder when if he eats more, he's going to gain weight and it's harder to lose it. But so I guess that would be the surprise. The other thing that he's in pain, he has stomach issues, like IBS type related kind of thing. Yeah. And he's in pain, I feel like 24/7. But he is the most outgoing, positive, nicest guy. He's a huge fan of the NBA of the Magic.
Oh, is he?
Magic. Oh my God,
ridiculous!
Ridiculous.
How about that?
They're the reason. That's why he's doing sports management degree.
Does he have a favorite player?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you have to ask him that. He's got lots of favorite players. We were very blessed to have seats there and have season tickets for a long time. So he would meet these players. Oh, that's neat. And they are amazing. They have a culture of just embracing, those who may not be, typical. Yeah, they're great. A few years ago, a friend of mine's daughter was battling cancer, and I reached out to the Magic, and some of their players responded in kind, sending nice video clips of support. Yeah, the terrific organization. Amazing. It's a culture, tone at the top, and it's been like that for a long time. And I just, it's an experience that I don't think, Anyway, it was wonderful for me. Yeah. If a young couple's out there going through something similar to what you all went through, would you have any advice for them? Anything that might help them? Because there's nothing more challenging than a young person with a disease or an illness, and especially a rare disease. You don't know what to do. You feel like your hands are tied. Any advice for those people? I think my first is don't believe everything you see. It's a spectrum disorder, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can't look at someone like Danny and say, okay, my kid could do this, but you can look at someone like Danny and go, my kid can do this. I mean, I'm saying? It doesn't mean, whatever they say online is not necessarily true. There are a lot of factors. It's very complex. So first of all, that's it, right? And do the education. You're not alone. You're not alone. If you're watching this and you have a child with Prader-Willi syndrome, you're not alone. And so there's a lot of resources. One thing I did with Danny is I enrolled him in every clinical trial I could get my hands on. There's an organization called the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, fpwr.org. And they've been around for a long, long time, and they are very much involved in research. There's another organization here in Florida, which is PWSA USA, and it's a support and research, and that's one other organization you can go to get information. But what I liked about FPWR was that I could be proactive. I could look to see where are my challenges, what do I think that Danny could use, and if I can get in some of these studies. And I think that's really important because again, every child is different.
Yeah.
And when you feel so, you feel very helpless when you have a child with a disorder
Yeah.
like that, especially
Yeah.
control freaks like myself. I'm used to fixing stuff.
Yeah.
You feel very helpless. So if you can do things to not feel as helpless like that, like participate in clinical trials,
Yeah.
Talk to other parents. I mean, my son is 21, and
Wow.
so he was one of the first kids getting I guess you called it clinical trials for growth hormone with Prader-Willi syndrome. He was 2.5 months old. It wasn't even FDA approved, but there were a whole bunch of clinical trials,
Yeah.
and I went around doctor to doctor with all these stacks of trials, and I said, I want you to put my son on growth hormone because 0 to 3 is so important. And a bunch of doctors said no, and finally came back around to that same doctor with the Children's Hospital, and he said, okay, I'll do it. And so it's that kind of thing. It's like,
Yeah.
don't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
It is hard work. Being older when I had Danny probably helped. A husband with the, good job, military, all that. We had
Right.
great benefits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's I cannot compare to some people who might not have all those blessings, but yeah.
One thing that impresses me as much as anything is you took control early. I say you didn't take no for an answer. And it would have been easy to sit back and trust the doctors completely, saying, okay, you know best. And I like that, and the fact that you raised him as a normal child.
Yeah.
You knew what the limitations were, what he could and could not do, but as far as you were concerned, he was just another kid.
He was, absolutely. And that was one thing when I got him into the school system, I'm like, I want him mainstreamed.
Yeah.
And because the more they're around typical functioning kids,
Oh,
anybody, right?
absolutely.
You mimic that behavioral,
Yeah.
like behavioral analysis. That's also the reason I had my daughter. Well, no, I had my daughter because I wanted another child.
Yeah.
But I also knew that, having another child would also, help Danny see
Sure.
typical, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what's happened. But yeah, and I'm going to give a plug for Brevard School Systems because
Yeah.
we moved here specifically because of the school systems. Danny was
see.
3, Jillian was 18 months old. John, who was a school board member,
Yeah, I
did
remember
all
that
the
time.
research,
Yeah.
and they were great schools, public schools, and
Yeah.
so we were coming here, and they were, and they have been for individuals with disabilities. You still have to advocate.
Yeah.
You got sometimes it's intimidating when you have an IEP, individualized education plan,
Yeah.
and you're sitting in that room, and you've got like this, whole group of teachers, principals, everybody
Yeah.
else, and then you're just right
You're
there,
there.
and they're telling you all these issues with your child,
Yeah.
and whether I wish. It becomes hard. I understand it becomes hard for teachers too when
Yeah.
you've got someone. But
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it's just, I walked out of there a few times and cried the whole way home. And then I was like, once I got home, I'm like, nope, I
do
am
it.
not going to allow that. And so I learned pretty quickly even there to advocate and say, look, I know the laws, I know the rules for individuals with disabilities, and I'm going to advocate for my kids. And
Yeah.
it's not that no one else will. It's just that everybody's busy, and
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to do.
You and John have raised a wonderful normal son
He's
and a
awesome.
wonderful lacrosse daughter.
Jillian going to Florida Tech now.
Yeah, close to home.
Yeah, she didn't like being away from home. She's
Oh,
like, no,
no.
she came back.
How's she doing?
She's doing great.
Is she?
She loves it. It's just such a different dynamic when I talk to her. She loves the school. She loves the
that's
team.
great.
Loves the coach. Coach is amazing. That takes big weight off your shoulders.
Huge weight. What is she studying? What does she want to do?
I always
Or
mess
does
this
she
up.
know
Yeah,
yet?
well, so she's also Army, ROTC. She got a
Okay.
4-year Army scholarship,
Wow.
and she wants to be an Army veterinarian. And so she's taking biomedical science, I think is what her degree is. Yeah, I'm like, really? You couldn't be like an international, whatever,
Yeah.
business or something? Like,
Yeah.
you got to do bio. That seems
Yeah.
even more challenging with everything else she's got going on.
Well,
So-
maybe she'd follow in your footsteps and be
Engineer.
Craig Technology one day.
Oh, no way.
Craig
Nope.
Technology Junior.
Danny, maybe.
Danny, maybe.
I think, we were just talking about internships that are coming up this summer, and I think Danny is looking at me like, do I get to do this? And I said,
Yeah.
if you want to, you get to do it. So, yeah.
Never know.
It's all good.
Yeah. Well, Carol, thanks for joining us. I know today is a very special day for you. It's Rare Disease Day,
Yeah.
and a lot of people, as I mentioned at the outset, we see you out and about, and it's all space industry related. But there's another Carol Craig that you've done some amazing things with some challenges, and your husband has as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Couldn't have done it without him.
I know it's been a team effort. I know Jillian's been involved. It's just
Same.
really neat to see how things, sometimes people can give up in situations like that, but you all chose to fight and came out on the good end.
Keep fighting.
There you
Absolutely.
go. Thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Carol Craig, next time we have you back, we're going to talk about the space industry and
All
what's
right.
going on, because I know there's a
There's
lot of
a
excitement on the Space Coast.
lot going on.
Yep.
Great.
So for my very special guest, Carol Craig, and for all of our sponsors, including Craig Technologies and Side of Space, I'm Steve Wilson with the Friday Night Locker Room and Space Coast Daily TV. We'll see you next time.